I remember the night she vanished, by the way the silence tasted. Metallic, sharp, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. I was sitting in my office, the lamplight trembling on the walls, as if even it feared the darkness pressing at the windows. My wife, Liora, was late coming home, but lateness was nothing unusual. She had a habit of wandering through bookstores long after closing hours, chasing stories the way I chased shadows. But then the phone rang, a single note, cold, surgical. I knew before I even lifted the receiver that the world I lived in, my patient, predictable world, had already died. Detective, a whisper coiled through the line, soft as breath but heavy as dirt thrown onto a coffin. She cried for you. The voice was wrong, not human wrong, something else wrong. The kind of sound that seems to bend the air around it. I forced out, "Where is she?" My voice sounded steadier than my bones felt. A low chuckle, the kind that makes candles gutter. "You'll find pieces, but not here." Then a click, and the line went dead. I sat frozen, the receiver still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone buzz like a trapped fly. A sour smell drifted through the cracked window. Ash and something rotten, as though someone had been burning memories right outside. I felt it in my blood then. This wasn't just a kidnapping. No, this was a message. And I was already too late.
I reached my home in under 7 minutes, a record I'd never wanted to set. The street was darker than it should have been, as if someone had drained the moonlight and left only the husk of night behind. My footsteps echoed strangely, too sharp, too hollow, like the pavement had become a drum skin stretched over something that shifted beneath. The front door stood half open. Liora never left it that way. I pushed it gently, and it swung inward with a low groan, almost a warning. The air inside was wrong, heavy, humid, thick with the scent of damp earth. It reminded me of old graves and older secrets. "Liora?" My voice barely carried. No answer. But the house, it breathed. Soft, rhythmic expansions of darkness along the walls, as if the shadows themselves were inhaling and exhaling. My lamp, a small one I kept by the entrance, flickered when I switched it on, its light shivering over the hallway. Then I saw it. A trail of footprints. Not hers. Bare. Elongated. Toes too long. Arches too high. They glistened on the floor as though whoever left them had been walking through something wet and black. They led toward the staircase. I felt my pulse stutter as a whisper brushed past my ear. No words, only the cold imprint of sound. The house fell silent again, but it was the kind of silence that has teeth. I followed the prints up, step by step, each board creaking as though trying to warn me away. At the top, where the corridor stretched into gloom, the footprints stopped abruptly. Not faded, not smudged, stopped mid-stride, as though something had lifted the creature straight off the floor. And on the wall beside them, written in a color far too dark to be paint, were 2 words. Still hunting. For a moment, I simply stared at those 2 words, feeling the weight of them press into my skin like cold fingers. Still hunting. Hunting what? Or whom? My throat tightened, but I forced myself to move. The corridor was narrow, the wallpaper peeling like dead bark. Every step forward felt like walking deeper into a throat that wanted to swallow me. At the end of the hall
was the bedroom I once shared with Liora, our refuge, our small island of warmth. Now the door hung open just a sliver, and a faint gleam of fractured light seeped through. It pulsed, irregularly, almost alive. I nudged the door open. The first thing I saw was the mirror. Our old oval-shaped dresser mirror, its glass cracked into a spiderweb of distorted reflections. Yet none of those reflections were mine, not a single one. Instead, I saw movement, slow, deliberate, something tall and thin stepping through the fragments as though they were windows into another room. Its limbs bent at angles no bones should tolerate, and its skin, if it was skin, shimmered like wet stone. And its face? No. Faces. Thousands of stretched, silent mouths forming a mosaic across its head. I didn't breathe. Couldn't.
A wind slammed into me, though the room was still, carrying the scent of cold soil, rust, and a faint trace of Liora's perfume. I snapped back, heart clawing against my ribs, but when I looked again, the mirror was empty. Only my own terrified reflection stared back, fractured into a dozen trembling pieces. On the dresser beneath it lay something small and delicate. Liora's ring, placed neatly, deliberately, and beside it, carved into the wooden surface with something sharp enough to gouge the grain. Find the door. I didn't yet understand what door the message meant, but I knew the monster wasn't done with me, or with her. I slipped Liora's ring into my pocket, though it felt more like sliding a shard of ice against my heart. The house had gone unbearably still, the kind of stillness that suggests not absence, but anticipation. Find the door. The words carved in the dresser throbbed in my mind like an open wound. I swept the room with my flashlight, its beam trembling over familiar shapes warped into strangers by the lingering gloom. Nothing looked touched, yet everything felt changed, like someone had rearranged the air, not the furniture. Then I heard it. A faint tapping. Not the random creaks of an old house settling. No, this was purposeful, rhythmic. 3 taps, a pause. 2 more, a pause, as though someone or something was signaling. The sound came from behind the wall. I pressed my palm against the wallpaper. Cold. Too cold.
I dragged my fingertips downward, and the paper peeled away with almost no resistance, revealing old wooden boards beneath. A thin slit running vertically between them. A door frame, where no door should have been. For a moment, I hesitated. Doors hidden in walls rarely lead to places one returns from, but Liora's ring felt like it burned in my pocket, urging me forward. I wedged my fingers into the crack and pulled. The boards groaned, then swung inward, not breaking, but bending, as though they had always been hinges waiting for a command. The smell that rushed out was brutal. Damp stone, old blood, and something sweeter, almost floral, like a funeral bouquet left to rot. A staircase descended into the dark, and on the first step sat an envelope, my name written across it in Liora's handwriting. I knelt, hands trembling more than I'd like to admit, and lifted it. A smear of something dark streaked one corner. Inside was only a single sheet of paper, edges torn, the ink smudged as though written in tears or rain. 4 words. Don't trust the light. Before I could react, the tapping started again, this time from below. Slow, deliberate, and getting closer. The tapping below shifted, no longer rhythmic, no longer patient. Now it sounded like something dragging its fingers along the stone walls, feeling its way upward.
toward me. I forced a slow breath, the kind that reminds a man he's still alive, and aimed my flashlight into the stairwell.
The beam stretched only a few steps down before dissolving into a thick, pulsating darkness. It wasn't the usual kind of dark. This one seemed to push back, like a living thing offended by intrusion. Liora's note echoed in my mind. Don't trust the light. So I switched the flashlight off. Instantly the world shrank. The air thickened, pressed against me. I felt, rather than saw, the shadows shifting, coiling, testing the edges of my resolve. But at least now nothing down there could see me either, if it needed light at all. With one hand on the wall, I stepped onto the first stair. It groaned softly, as though surprised by the weight after so many silent years. The next step felt colder, the one after that, colder still. My breath turned to mist, even though upstairs the air had been warm. Then the voices began. Whispers at first, threading through the darkness like strands of hair brushing my face. Some sounded familiar, too familiar. "Liora," I hissed into the dark, but the whispers only multiplied. Faint echoes of her voice calling my name, warped as though drifting through water. I knew better than to believe them. Still, something in me flinched every time I heard her say, "Help." The stairs twisted sharply, and I followed the curve by touch alone. The stone walls were damp under my fingertips, veins of moisture running like cold tears. Beneath my feet, the steps grew uneven, carved by something less precise than tools. And then I felt warm air drift across my cheek. Warm and breathing. A voice right beside my ear whispered in Liora's perfect tone, "Why did you let me go?" My hand shot out in reflex and touched nothing but empty air. Behind me, something shifted. Ahead of me, something waited. Somewhere in between, my wife's voice broke softly into sobs. I descended further, because the only way out of this darkness was through it. The staircase spat me out into a corridor so narrow I could feel the walls grazing my shoulders. The air shimmered with a heat that didn't belong underground. Thick, sticky, almost feverish. My lungs fought it with each breath, as though the air itself didn't want to be inhaled. Somewhere behind me, the whispers faded. Somewhere ahead, something else awakened. A faint glow pulsed in the distance, soft, reddish like embers struggling to recall the warmth of a long-dead fire. "Don't trust the light," Liora had written. But there was nothing else to follow, and the darkness at my back felt far worse than any glow in front of me. I moved toward it. The corridor ended abruptly at a wooden door, or at least what looked like one. But when I reached out and touched it, the surface flexed under my fingers like taut skin. A shudder ran through it, the faintest tremor, as though the door itself had felt my touch. The reddish glow seeped from the edges of this barrier. Then, without warning, the surface split open. Not a polite swing on hinges, not a crack forced by pressure. It peeled open like something organic, revealing a room bathed in that strange ember light. I stepped inside, because the alternative was to stay in a hallway of breathing walls, and I had limits even in this nightmare. The room was circular, carved from stone so dark it reflected almost nothing. In the center stood a chair, an old wooden thing, tall-backed, the kind found in abandoned chapels or interrogation rooms. Ropes dangled from its arms and legs like dead serpents, and someone was sitting in it. My heart stopped, then lurched back to life painfully. It was Liora. her silhouette unmistakable, her head tilted downward, hair falling in strands like shadows dripping over her face. "Liora." My voice cracked like dry wood. She didn't move. The ember light flickered, giving the impression that her body swayed slightly forward then back, as though rocked by an invisible breeze. But the air in the room was still, suffocatingly still. I stepped closer. "Liora, I'm here. I found you." Another step. "Say something." Her head twitched once, sharply. My breath froze. Then the light behind her brightened, just enough to reveal her face, and I realized two things at the same time. The woman in the chair wore my wife's shape, but the thing smiling through her skin was not Liora. Her smile was wrong. Not because it was too wide, though it was. Not because it stretched far past where flesh should reasonably stretch, though it did, but because it was empty. A shape without a soul. "Liora," I whispered again, even though every instinct in me screamed that this was no longer her, if it had ever been. The thing in her skin lifted its head slowly, like a puppet pulled upward by tangled strings. The ember light painted hollows under her cheekbones, turning her eyes into dark wells that reflected nothing back. Then she spoke. Except it wasn't her voice. Not really. It was a chorus of whispers, layered and disjointed, as though a dozen unseen mouths were trying to imitate what a living woman should sound like. "You came too quickly." Her lips barely moved, yet the words crawled across the room like insects. I stepped back, hand drifting toward the knife I kept hidden in my coat. I didn't know if a blade could help me here, but I knew helplessness was a luxury I couldn't afford. "Where is she?" I forced out. "Where is my wife?" The creature tilted its head. Bones cracked. Something beneath the borrowed skin writhed. "She opened the door. She invited us in. You know she always wanted to understand the places you never told her about." My vision blurred with panic and rage. "Tell me where she is." "And if we do," the thing whispered, leaning forward, "will you follow her?" The ropes around its wrists snapped open like brittle twigs. It rose from the chair. The skin of its arms began to split, thin seams opening along the length of them, glowing faintly from within, as though something brighter, hotter, wrong lived under the flesh and wanted out. I backed away, pulse thundering. The walls around me seemed to bend, narrowing, as though the room itself wanted me to push closer to the unfolding horror. "Liora is waiting," it hissed, its voice deepening until the stone beneath my boots vibrated. "Follow, detective." It took one step toward me, and the ember light flared violently, throwing its true shape onto the walls in a sprawling, impossible shadow. Not human, not close. That was all the decision I needed. I ran. Behind me, the creature shrieked, so loud, so sharp it split the air like shattered glass, and the door I had entered through slammed shut on its own, leaving me in a new corridor, one I hadn't come from. One that definitely hadn't been there before. The new corridor stretched before me like the throat of some buried beast, long, uneven, and gently pulsing with a heartbeat not my own. The walls were stone, but slick, warm, as though alive beneath a thin layer of cold sweat. Behind me, the door, if it was a door, had sealed shut without a seam. I couldn't hear the creature anymore, but silence didn't comfort me. Not here. Not now. The darkness ahead was thick, almost velvety, but within it I sensed faint movements, shifts of air, the brush of unseen bodies. I moved forward because staying meant becoming part of whatever lived in the room behind me.
Each step echoed strangely, not outward, but inward. The sound didn't bounce down the corridor. It folded back toward me, settling into my ears like a whisper of my own footsteps asking why. Then the echoes changed. They stopped mimicking my steps. They began stepping after mine. I froze. The corridor froze with me. For a moment, I heard only my heartbeat, fast, frantic, trying to convince my ribs to let it escape. Then, from somewhere behind, a soft step. Close. Too close. I turned sharply, but the darkness behind me was thick enough to be physical. My fingers brushed the wall, and a shiver shot through it, running ahead, as though my touch had startled something beneath the stone. A faint glow began to pulse ahead, not red like the ember room, but a sickly yellow-green, like fungus thriving in places sunlight had never known. As I approached, I saw that the light came not from a lamp, but from carvings in the wall. Symbols scratched deep, each one burning with a queasy luminescence. I leaned in. The carvings weren't symbols. They were words. My name. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Written over each other in frenzied strokes. Someone had been here. Someone who knew me, or something that did. Then, underneath all the layered carvings, I noticed a fresh line. Still wet, still glistening. 3 words etched with an unmistakable hand. She went deeper.
Liora. Alive? Running? Or being dragged? The step behind me came again, closer, too close to be human. I didn't turn, didn't breathe. I just pressed forward into the narrow dark, toward the sickly glow and the words that promised either hope or a new kind of nightmare. Behind me, something inhaled sharply, as if tasting the back of my neck. I plunged deeper into the corridor, not daring to look back. The breath that had grazed my neck still clung to my skin, cold, moist, eager. Whatever followed me moved without footsteps now, as if it had realized sound was a kindness it no longer wished to offer. The sickly glow along the walls grew brighter, spreading like mold. It illuminated shapes in the stone I hadn't noticed before. Indentations, shallow depressions, worn smooth over years or centuries. Then I understood what they were. Eye sockets, not carved, grown. The stone bulged slightly around them, as if the walls themselves had developed the anatomy to stare. And inside each socket, something glimmered faintly in the glow. Milky white orbs, swirling sluggishly, like marbles filled with fog. Hundreds of them, watching. As I walked, their pupils, if they had pupils, shifted to follow me. A ripple of whispering sounds rose, soft as wind, though there was no breeze. It wasn't speech. It was awareness. Judgment. I tightened my grip on my knife. It felt pathetically small. Ahead, the corridor widened into a chamber. The glow pooled there, brighter, almost unbearable.
I shielded my eyes as I stepped through the threshold. The chamber was circular, like the one with the false Liora, but larger and alive in a different way. The walls were covered completely with those eyes, each one twitching, shivering, turning. In the center stood an obsidian pillar, polished smooth, reflecting nothing but swallowing the light around it. And on the surface of the pillar, a handprint. Liora's handprint, small, elegant, pressed deep enough to have cracked the stone around it. I moved closer, breath trembling. Her voice drifted through the chamber then, soft, desperate, familiar. "Please, don't let them take me." My chest tightened painfully. "Liora, I'm here!" "Don't," the voice warped, stretched, thinned. "Don't trust the—" It cut off with a wet snap. The eyes around the chamber blinked in unison, then shifted. All of them. Not toward me, but toward something creeping from the corridor behind me.
I turned and saw a shape pulling itself forward, half melted, half formed, its limbs bending wrong, its face a soft blur of shifting features, as if trying on expressions it had never learned to mimic. It crawled toward me on all fours, head twitching, mouth opening too wide, and from its throat came Leora's voice. "Help me!" But the eyes on the walls hissed. They knew it wasn't her.
And so did I. The creature dragged itself closer, each movement wet and deliberate, like muscle sliding over bone without skin to restrain it. Its limbs bent wrong, too many joints, too much flexibility, like it hadn't yet decided what kind of anatomy it wanted to imitate. But the voice was perfect. "Please, help me, it hurts." Every syllable was Liora, every tremble, every breath. For a heartbeat, I almost stepped forward. Almost. Then the walls saved me. Hundreds of eyes blinked at once, slow, condemning. Some narrowed, others widened, pupils dilating in warning. A soft rumble vibrated through the chamber, low and ancient, like the muttering of a creature too old to bother speaking out loud. The mimic froze. It turned its shifting face toward the walls, and the walls looked back. A tremor passed through the creature's form, its edges flickering like a candle flame caught in a dying breeze. The stolen voice cracked, warped, reshaped into something deeper, wetter, filled with teeth. "You shouldn't have come." Then it lunged. I dodged aside as it slammed into the obsidian pillar, its body smearing across its surface like hot wax. The pillar groaned under the impact. A crack snaked outward from Leora's handprint, thin, delicate, opening. The mimic peeled itself off the stone with a sickening slurp, its shape now taller, more human-like, as though the chamber itself was teaching it new proportions. It straightened, joints popping, spine lengthening. Its face smoothed over, features rearranging like clay touched by too many hands. It was shaping itself into her. Leora's cheekbones, Leora's jaw, Leora's eyes, almost, but the smile. The smile gave it away. "Come closer," it breathed. "I can show you where she went." Behind it, the pillar's crack widened. A faint light, different from any glow I'd seen down here, spilled through. A cool silvery gleam, gentle as moonlight on quiet water. The eyes on the walls darted toward the crack. They knew the mimic didn't want me seeing what lay beyond. The creature hissed, its incomplete face rippling with fury. It lunged again, faster this time. And I understood the choice before me. Face the monster wearing my wife's face, or dive through a crack in the unknown. I chose the unknown. I threw myself at the pillar, toward that thin blade of silver light. The mimic shrieked behind me, so loud the chamber vibrated, so sharp the eyes clenched shut. And the moment my hand touched the crack, the stone gave way like water and swallowed me whole. I didn't fall. I floated. The darkness I expected never came. Instead, the world dissolved into a soft shimmering silver, like moonlight diffused through fog. Weightless, soundless, a silence so deep it felt sacred or forbidden. I reached out, but my hand made no shadow here. The light passed through me, around me, into me. My heartbeat slowed, became a distant thing, like it belonged to someone I used to be. Then, faintly, I heard it, a single note ringing through the silver. A bell, small, delicate, the kind Liora kept on her nightstand, a gift from her grandmother.
She used to ring it when she wanted me to pause whatever case I was drowning in and come to her. The sound repeated, soft, insistent, calling me. I followed it. As I moved, shapes materialized in the fog, indistinct at first, then clearer. Trees without leaves, paths without ground, memories without owners. They drifted like ghosts suspended in water. Whispers began weaving between them. This way. You're close. She's waiting. None of the voices were Liora's, yet every one of them knew her name. The fog parted suddenly, and I stepped into a clearing of sorts, an open expanse within the silver, where the light pooled into a still, mirror-flat surface stretching endlessly. But it wasn't water. It was too smooth, too reflective, a floor of perfect silver glass. In the center of it stood a doorframe. Just a frame, no door, no hinges, no wall. Black wood, carved with symbols I recognized from the corridor, and beneath the frame, kneeling on the silver surface, was Liora. Her hair spilled around her like a dark halo. Her hands were pressed to the floor, trembling as though she'd been clawing at the surface, trying to escape.
Her breath came in shallow gasps, each one misting the air with cold. "Liora!" I sprinted toward her, the silver surface rippling beneath my feet like a disturbed pond. She lifted her head. Her eyes, thank whatever gods listen in places like this, were hers. Not hollow, not borrowed, not stolen. "Don't come closer," she whispered. I dropped to my knees beside her anyway. "I'm getting you out." Her fingers clutched my sleeve with desperate strength. "It's not a door. It's a threshold, and it chose me before it chose you." A chill sliced down my spine. "What does that mean?" She swallowed, eyes darting to the empty frame behind her. "It leads to them." "The things in the walls? The mimic?" "No." Her voice trembled. "They were only their shadows." My blood turned to ice. "They want you," she whispered. "They always wanted you. I just stepped into your place." A low hum rolled across the silver plain, deep, resonant, like something massive shifting in its sleep beneath the surface. The frame behind her darkened until it was no longer an absence of light, but a presence, dense, hungry, aware. The silver around it dimmed, retreating like frightened water. A pressure filled the air, heavy enough to bow my spine. Liora tightened her grip on my sleeve, her voice barely a breath. "It noticed you. Don't move. Don't look at it." Too late.
Something pressed through the frame. Not a body, no shape that obeyed the laws of flesh or bone. It came like a ripple in reality, bending the silver surface beneath it into deep spirals. The air shuddered. A low, murmuring chorus rose from beneath the silver plain, as if thousands of unseen mouths were whispering in anticipation. From the threshold emerged a silhouette made of shifting shadows, stretched, pulled, stitched together from fragments of darkness left behind by every nightmare I'd ever forgotten. Its form flickered, refusing to decide on a single outline. One moment it was tall, the next hunched, the next nothing more than a floating void. But its eyes, those stayed constant. Two pinpricks of impossible brightness, white like stars reflected in a predator's gaze, and they fixed on me. The silver floor cracked under my knees. Liora pushed herself between us, trembling violently. "No,
You chose me, not him." The shadow rippled. A voice unfurled from it, layered, ancient, as if spoken through the throats of 1,000 buried things. "We chose the one who opens doors." The voice vibrated in my bones. "And he opens them best." A chill deeper than fear slid through me. I knew, somehow, what it meant. I had spent years following trails others couldn't see, noticing cracks in stories, feeling wrongness like a draft between worlds. Curiosity had been my curse long before it was my profession. "She stepped into your shadow," the voice continued, "but shadows cannot wear another's shape for long."
Liora shuddered. Tears streaked her face, silvered by the light. "I only wanted to protect you." The shadow expanded, stretching tall enough to eclipse the door frame entirely. A tendril of darkness snaked outward, curling toward my chest. The air around me grew thin, too thin to breathe. Instinct took over. I grabbed Leora's shoulders. "On my mark, we run." Her eyes widened with terror. "You can't outrun it!" "No," I said, "but maybe we can outrun its rules." The threshold groaned behind the shadow, its wooden frame splitting like brittle teeth. The silver beneath it buckled, swallowing chunks of light. The thing surged forward. I hurled myself and Liora sideways, rolling across the silver surface as a blast of cold tore through the space we'd occupied. The shadow shrieked, a sound so sharp it cracked the air like glass. The silver plane shattered. A rupture opened beneath us. Light, pure, white, violent, swallowed everything. I felt Leora's fingers slip from mine, and then nothing. I surfaced from nothingness like a man dragged out of deep water. My lungs burned before they remembered how to breathe. My vision flickered, black, then white, then a dim, trembling glow. I lay on something solid, cold, familiar, in an unfamiliar way. Stone. Above me, the ceiling of my own home stared back. Cracked, quiet, still. I was in my bedroom. Returned. But alone. The air tasted stale, as though it hadn't been breathed in years. A pale, morning glow leaked through the window, weak but real. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I heard ordinary sounds. A clock ticking, a distant car passing, the world continuing, unaware of the places beneath it. "Liora," I whispered. No answer. I staggered to my feet, fighting the lingering dizziness. My coat was torn, my knife was gone, my fingers were streaked with silver dust that evaporated as I stared at it. A dream? No, dreams don't leave scars. And then I saw it. On the dresser, where her ring once lay, sat a small object. A bell. Leora's bell. But not the same, not quite. Its metal was darker, its surface etched with faint, shifting patterns that hadn't been there before. When I reached out and brushed it with my fingertips, the room dimmed for a moment, shadows tightening like they recognized the sound it hadn't yet made. I lifted it. The bell chimed once. Soft, sharp, perfect. And the sound didn't fade. It lingered, hanging in the air like a thread stretched taut between worlds. A whisper arose from within the chime, barely audible, barely real. My name. Her voice. Find me. My breath caught, but before I could speak, the bell fell silent. The shadows loosened, the room warmed, but the echo remained inside me, alive, trembling, promising. She wasn't gone, not taken, not lost, just on the other side of a door I had only begun.
And I knew what I would do. I would find the threshold again. I would follow the trail through whatever darkness waited. I would step into places no light was meant to touch. Because she called my name, and I always answer. The bell chimed softly in my hand again, unbidden, eager. The next investigation had already begun.